This is Marc Tobias at MTN headquarters in Miramar, Florida, with their CEO, Errol Olivier. And you're the CEO and president. And how long have you been here, sir?
I've been here just over a year and a half.
Very good. Well, I just took a tour of your facility, and for my readers that aren't familiar with MTN, this is the global communications company for maritime. And this is how your company started, is that correct?
Yeah, so 30 years ago, the company started with the vision of putting satellite communications on board commercial shipping vessels.
Was that timed, or maybe you don't know, in coordination with some of the geostationary satellites going up, like Intelsat?
Right.
Was that really how you started in business? You saw the opportunity, I'm assuming.
Yeah, so the VSAT on board these commercial ships came a little bit later in the evolution of MTN, but Inmarsat's been out for many, many years. MTN is actually the pioneers of putting VSAT communications, transmit and receive, not just receive only, on maritime vessels.
And that started really for commercial ships when?
That's a good question. It's way before my time, but I would guess that would have been just a bit over 20 years ago.
So passengers on cruise ships,
Yes.
about 20 years ago, began experiencing the evolution of communications so that they could communicate and not be totally out of service. So you're a private company.
We are.
And you provide communications on a global basis. Is there anywhere you don't operate?
Well, in the traditional VSAT communications that we provide, it's pretty difficult to reach the North and South Pole. But when you look at our global network and our footprints and our satellites, we cover just about every region around the world. There's not a place that I can think of besides like I said, as you get closer to the North and South Pole, where nobody can reach unless you're on a LEO type network, where in like Iridium or Globalstar network.
And we were in your network operations center earlier, and obviously there are gaps, but most people aren't going there.
Right. And those are purposely? Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. So what primary communication services does your company provide?
So, our core business is in the leisure market. That is the cruise line and the yacht business. That is our core. And we're providing all of the communications, the satellite connectivity to provide voice, data, video, and all the products that go along with it. So we're not just a VSAT service provider. We provide the products that ride on top of the VSAT. So that might be internet cafes. It could be ship-to-ship calling, intra-ship calling. So voice applications. Could be Facebook kind of applications where passengers will want to connect and be connected with their family and friends.
So really, as I've written other articles about your services on ships, you really are the comm link between passengers and crew to the outside world.
We are, absolutely.
You're it.
That's it.
Who's number two in the world?
Number two in the providing satellite
Yes.
services to the cruise line industry would be Harris Corporation.
Okay. And they also make equipment. They also make hardware as well.
They also make hardware.
Yes. So your primary customers are maritime. You don't do aircraft. You just do maritime.
We do some aircraft. We provide some aviation services through third parties. So we're the carrier. We're the
But
backbone.
you're just the carrier.
Yeah, we provide the teleport services in the space segment.
Okay. You had a major announcement involving a new platform and a new generation of communications that you're introducing called Nexus.
That's it.
What is it?
Well, Nexus is what we're so excited about. Nexus is, the next generation network. We're not a VSAT services provider. We're a telecommunications service provider. And when you look at VSAT services providers, they're providing hardware and more bandwidth. And that will never solve the problems of these customers that are going on board ships that have higher and higher demands every year for voice and data. So it's a very sophisticated platform and network that takes in satellite, Wi-Fi, and then this ship cloud network. Combines it all into a onboard infrastructure that allows us to do some very sophisticated product development, some optimization, some caching and storage, and some high-powered computing to provide a much better experience to the end users. So Nexus is really about, satellite bandwidth is not the solution, it's only part of the solution. So we've got to take Wi-Fi, Wi-Fi connectivity in the ports, augment that with the satellite connectivity out at sea, so that when the ships come into the port, we can switch them on to the Wi-Fi network or the wireless terrestrial network, and we can take that satellite capacity and release it to other ships that are still out at sea.
But how do you, just as a question, and I know you're not a tech.
Was.
Right. How do you utilize Wi-Fi, for example, or envision that in port? First of all, because Wi-Fi has about a 300-foot limitation in range. So how do I sit on the ship and interconnect with a Wi-Fi system in port?
That's a good question. So we're not using the kind of Wi-Fi hotspots that you and I would use at home. We're using some very high gain antennas on the beach, and we're also using stabilized antenna systems on the ships that actually point to a Wi-Fi location on land. That might be on a building, might be the roof of a building, might be 250 feet up on a tower, but that gives us extended range. Today we're already getting 12 to 15 miles, and we're not even pushing the limits. With some special software, we should easily get to 20 miles and beyond.
Is WiMAX going anywhere in this equation?
Well, we're building our network to be technology agnostic. So as we're building Wi-Fi ports around the world, if a ship comes into a WiMAX, a LTE, or a 3G type of network, our system is designed to allow the customers to switch onto any type of platform.
So do you tie in at all with PowerWave out of California and their technology?
No, not that I'm aware of, but there's a lot of things that go on with our engineering department that.
Well, I did an interview out there that they supply all of the, for example, in-building and conference center links to the cellular networks on a hardwire link. And it just occurred to me as I'm sitting here visiting with you that maybe that's one of your options. Your network operations is here in Miramar, but you have other network operation centers throughout the world.
Yes, we do. So this is our main headquarters, and it's our main network operations center. We actually have a backup network operations center in Santander, Spain, and also a network operations center, secure network operations center in Leesburg, Virginia, and a fourth operations center in Homedale, New Jersey.
Do you own your own satellites? I know you're investing in some satellites to control your own bandwidth and essentially destiny. Right now, are most of your satellites, you rent the space on the birds from most of the companies?
All the conventional C and KU band satellite is the traditional type of lease capacity, short-term, long-term, but we've made a significant investment in the launch of this new Intelsat Epic network, where we're actually purchasing and we're the owners of the payloads that are going to be put into these very high dense areas where there's hundreds of cruise ships that are coming in and out of that area throughout the year.
This is a very complicated technical business that you're running. And for my BlackBerry or Android or iPhone to work on a cruise ship, it's very complicated. Nobody understands it's not just a cell site on the ship. How does all this get coordinated between cruise ship companies, between cellular carriers? What's the overseeing organization that makes all this work? Because it's not just your company.
Right, that's right. Right, so there are a few primary cellular carriers on board cruise ships, WMS and MCP. And we're the underlying satellite carrier to bring that traffic back to the beach. But these are the guys that have equipment installed on the vessels, have the roaming agreements with all of the major carriers around the world, whether it be AT&T, Verizon, Sprint, Orange, T-Mobile, France Telecom, whomever. So it's the satellite backbone plus the infrastructure by these cellular carriers and the roaming agreements with all these major wireless carriers around the world.
Who puts the pico cell sites on the ship? Is that part of what you offer? And then you negotiate roaming agreements with all the carriers?
No, the majority of cruise ships around the world have WMS as the cellular carrier on board. So they tie into our satellite backbone.
My mom was on a ship and was told not to use her satellite phone by the staff because it would interfere with your equipment. Is there any truth to that?
Well, if your mom's a licensed ham operator
No,
there's no truth to that. I mean, if your mom's using a handheld satellite phone, it's probably an Iridium or a Global Star. It's working on L-band frequencies. You know, we've got reporters working around the world with C, KU, and L-band sitting, side by side. You get into the equipment room and you're trying to use your phone, which would be...
That's a different issue.
It wouldn't be practical anyway.
Right.
No, there should be no problem with that.
So what's Nexus? First of all, when are you deploying? When do you look at deploying Nexus?
So Nexus comes in several phases, and we've already started. So we started rolling out Wi-Fi ports in Alaska, Wi-Fi ports in Hawaii, in the Caribbean, and we have some ports being turned up in Europe now. And they're going to expand around the world as the customers, come to us and tell us what's most important to them. So that's one phase of it. The other phase is the launch of these high throughput multiple spot beam satellites, with the Epic. Now, that launch doesn't happen until 2015, but we've worked with the satellite carriers to get bridge capacity. So that's another phase. The Ship Cloud and Ship Cloud network, that network is under development right now. We've already made significant progress. We expect that to be available second quarter 2013.
So when you say Ship Cloud, does that mean that as a consumer, I can upload material and ultimately you'll pass it through to your storage cloud? It may not be instantaneous as capacity is available.
Yes. So
like at 3 in the morning when nobody's using services, you can upload or download material.
At 3 in the morning when nobody's using services, or when you get into port and we transition over to Wi-Fi and we do major dumps. So, it's really a lot about, it is about storage, and it is about acceleration, and it is about optimization, but it's really about the kinds of products that will be optimized to run over satellites. So today, if you try to use your iPhone and do Facebook on a ship, you're going to be consuming quite a bit of internet connectivity. These products are going to be developed to work over satellite, timed right, with the right types of features that they don't use too much bandwidth. So if I have a chance to, one example is we've developed a voice application called MTN Connect. And this voice application is optimized to run over satellites. So if you were out on a cruise ship trying to use Skype takes up as much. Well, you're one of those guys that, he's out there using so much bandwidth because it does not optimize for satellite. But when you use the MTN Connect, it is optimized for great performance.
For latency and bandwidth.
For latency and bandwidth, and doesn't take up more bandwidth than it needs to make a voice call.
Well, I say I use Skype and Fring on board ship, but sometimes. And it depends what the connectivity is, and there's also latency that can be a real problem or not.
Right.
But and what's the apps that you're coming up with?
So there'll be a number of social media apps, because those are the most popular and the high demand, driving really all the capacity. So, we're looking at the connected cruiser apps, which are really Facebook apps that allow full Facebook kind of connectivity. We also have the voice apps allowing you to do ship-to-ship calling, ship-to-ship texting, intra-ship. So a family of 4 goes out, mom and dad wants to let the kids roam, teenagers roam around the ship, but we want to stay in touch. The intra-ship type of voice calling and texting. So other applications are MTN's Global TV allows ships to go around the world, have consistent TV programming. Now you can take your iPad to the pool and watch those movies, those sports, those...
On Wi-Fi.
On Wi-Fi.
Without incurring huge costs.
Without incurring huge costs, because that would be a local onboard through Ship Cloud and through the existing TV programming that's already subscribed by the ship.
And do you provide, or does the cruise ship provide the actual Wi-Fi facilities on board? Is that, as I understand it, that's not yours, that's the ship's problem?
And that's a case-by-case basis. There are some, on a number of ships, We have provided the infrastructure, the Wi-Fi infrastructure, but on the majority, it's infrastructure that's built in, to the ship's IT infrastructure.
Is there any content restrictions coming through your network? I know you don't like streaming because it just eats up bandwidth.
So, there are some content restrictions, and those are really sort of dictated by the cruise lines, what they want to allow the onboard customers to use. But when you buy a internet package on board a ship, you pretty much have a bit of flexibility and freedom. But what they're trying to do is make sure that we don't have applications that are downstreaming, huge video files while other people are just trying to get their basic email connectivity.
Is it possible for me to get a static IP address while I'm on a ship? Or I'm just in the pool with everybody else and it's a assigned address and that's the end of the story?
That's a good technical question for a good technical guy. And I would tell you yes, and I would tell our IT and engineers, yeah, but that should not be a problem. Just don't ask me how.
Okay, data speeds.
Well, data speeds
right now, it's like 250 kilobit, maybe 500 kilobit. Okay. When you launch and deploy your new Nexus system, are we talking about a megabit, 2 megabit, LTE type speeds?
Yeah. So as I tell the employees here, we've got to get kilobytes, kilobits, and megabits out of our vocabulary. We need to be talking in terms of gigabytes and terabytes. And it's a lot about throughput, not just speed, but today we see ships that have 3 to 5,000 passengers with less than 5 megabits. Do the calculations. It's just not fast enough.
No,
it's not enough connectivity. But the key thing here is that we can't keep throwing satellite bandwidth as a solution. We've got to solve the problem, and solving that problem means let's do a lot of processing on board. Let's download a whole lot of videos and have it on board so that we don't have to go over the satellite. So it's cache, but it's even more caching than the caching folks are doing today. It's a lot more sophisticated. The other thing I might mention is that moving from satellite to Wi-Fi is very tricky, and it's going to require really sophisticated switching because, as you said, I want a static IP address, I want to make phone calls, I'm having a conference call with the office, it's a board meeting, and I'm on vacation, and I need to be in touch. I don't want to drop call. So we have to be able to switch from satellite to Wi-Fi with no interruptions, and we do that with a technology we've developed called Zero Impact. It allows us to make before break type of connections.
That's a big problem.
Big problem.
Yeah, that's there to make it seamless between Wi-Fi.
Absolutely.
That's a big problem. Why does your service go down every once in a while when I'm on a cruise ship? I know that's a really open-ended question, but is that just planned? Is it maintenance? I mean, I notice in certain parts of the world, not North Pole, South Pole, that there won't be service for several hours.
Yeah.
Is that pretty much normal because of the way the network operates, or is that maintenance? Or
there's a number of reasons why it could be. So some ships have single antennas, some ships have dual stabilized antennas. So to minimize the blockages and the outages. So as the ship goes, north and south, if the satellite is in between the satellite antenna and let's say the ship's stack, then you could have outages. When you have 2 satellites on board, you've always got 2 satellite terminals looking for 2 birds up in the sky. So you could have a momentary outage if you have one stabilized antenna on board while it sees that it's about to get an interruption because it's going to have blockage. It goes out and searches for another satellite. So we have something called automatic beam switching, which allows that terminal to move to another bird up in the sky where it does not have any blockage. So you could also go into places like Alaska, where it's really, really difficult to provide satellite communications in Alaska because number one, you're so so close to the North Pole up there, and your look angles are low, and now you've got mountains on both sides of you. So that's another place where Wi-Fi in the ports are going to greatly improve the connectivity and the availability.
If how far out from port do you have to turn off your cellular?
Well, that all depends if the cellular carrier has a license in that area. So, if you're talking about in the Gulf of Mexico, you probably have 12-mile limitations. If you're in Europe, that's different. That'd be a great A great question that I can put our partners in the cellular world.
Well, I was just
back to
wondering.
you, but
I was just wondering because when we're on ships, we lose communications often because we're within a 12 mile,
12 miles,
20 mile, whatever
right.
the statutory limit is.
the voice app would come into play where there would not be any limitations when you get into the port.
Right. So last question. Nexus is where we go from here in the industry?
Nexus is where we go from here. I think what we're hoping is that the industry recognizes that we're here to solve the problem. We're not here just to sell more and more bandwidth. As I told someone earlier this week, it's like a greyhound chasing a rabbit. You'll never catch it. Every year the applications that passengers and crew members and staff are using, they're using their mobile phones and their tablets to do more and more things. And connectivity is going more mobile. So, every year we're going to need more bandwidth. Every year, that new applications and the speeds get faster on land, they're going to require them, out at sea. So we got to solve the problem, and the only way you can solve that problem is putting a sophisticated infrastructure on board.
I interviewed Marty Cooper a few months ago, the father of Cellular.
Mhm.
Made the first phone call, and he said the same thing. Bandwidth requirements are going to go up 20 to 40 times. He says that's not the solution to the problem. It's smart antennas, it's smart radios. It's much different than just, as you say, throwing bandwidth at the problem, because that's not going to solve the problem.
Right.
Sir, thank you very much. It's been a pleasure.
Same here. Thank you.